All right, so we are going to get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Hoover, and I am the Coalition Coordinator for the Key Coalition and also today's webinar host. Thank you so much for joining us for our webinar today, titled Youth Substance Use Prevention Starts at Home Environmental Factors That Impact Kids. We have two experienced substance use treatment and prevention professionals here to speak with us. Eric Deed from Front Door Health and Erin Tegge from Peer Services. We will be recording this presentation and it will be shared on our website within a few days after the presentation has concluded. If you have questions throughout the presentation, please enter them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, as we have set aside some time at the end for questions. So first, I would like to introduce the Key Coalition. We are a youth substance use prevention coalition that started in 2018. We serve the communities in and around New Trier Township, Illinois. Much of our work has focused on communication campaigns, youth and parent education, making resources accessible for youth and families, and more. We have big plans for the future as a coalition, with one of those being our community newsletter, which is set to roll out in January 2023. This newsletter will provide substance use prevention information, resources, events, and news directly to your email inbox. So I invite you to scan the QR code on the screen to be taken to our Linktree account. Our Linktree account houses all of our social media accounts, contact information, events from the Key Coalition and our partners, articles, prevention information for parents, resources, access to our youth-focused Linktree account, tips, fact sheets, and much, much more. We would love to have you sign up for our newsletter and support us on social media. And with that, I would like to introduce our speakers. First, we have Erin Tegge. Erin Tegge is the Prevention Program Coordinator at Peer Services, providing direct prevention services to Evanston, New Trier Township, and Northfield Township. Erin has been with Peer Services since 2014, working in the prevention department. She has over 14 years of experience in the field of social work and has worked with youth, families, and adults in a variety of capacities, including community intervention and treatment. And Erin previously attended the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, where she received her Bachelor of Science in Psychology. She continued her studies at the University of Chicago, where she graduated with a Master's in Social Service Administration. Erin works closely with the Evanston, New Trier, Glenview, and Northbrook communities. She provides consultation on best practices in youth substance use prevention to schools, community organizations, and coalitions. She also collaborates with school social workers and educators, oversees agency program implementation and evaluations, collects and analyzes data to measure effectiveness of programs, uses data to inform prevention programming, and manages state and local grants. Erin is also one of Peer's main trainers on substance use prevention topics and is a youth and adult mental health first aid trainer. Next, we have Eric Dean. He is the CEO for Front Door Health. He strongly believes that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to recovery. We are all unique individuals with varied needs, values, and goals. Therefore, to be effective, treatment must be personalized and adaptive as our needs change. As such, Eric has worked to develop Front Door Health's distinctive addiction treatment program, which gives clients 24/7 access to a physician-led multidisciplinary team of healthcare providers in their homes. Eric brings Front Door Health years of experience in the behavioral health field, where he held clinical, administrative, and research roles. Most recently as the manager of research and development for Gateway Foundation, the largest nonprofit addiction treatment provider in the United States. This diversity of professional experience has allowed him to see different sides of the treatment process. He has expertise in addiction and mental health treatment, evidence-based treatment practices, program evaluation, and data analytics, and using digital technology to support mental health and improve access to care. Eric is a licensed professional counselor and certified alcohol and drug counselor. He earned a Bachelor of Science at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign a Juris Doctor and Master of Business Administration from Case Western Reserve University School of Law and Weatherhead School of Management, a Master of Counseling Psychology with a concentration in the treatment of addiction disorders from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, and a Master of Public Policy from the University of Chicago Harris School of Public Policy. He also works as an adjunct professor at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, where he teaches graduate students about addiction, addiction counseling, psychopathology, and psychopharmacology. Thank you both for being here to speak with us. So the goal of today's webinar is to learn about substance use prevention and how we can help create an environment for youth that empowers them to make healthy choices for themselves and to be free of substance use. We will do that by covering the listed objectives. And with that, I would like to pass it over to our first speaker, Erin Tegge, who will be talking to us about prevention and what we are currently seeing in the community.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. I'm very excited to be here. I love talking about this topic. So I'm going to give a brief overview of kind of what substance use prevention is, what our focus is in the prevention field, and as that relates to then what Eric will be following up after me and what he will be speaking about. So when we think of substance use prevention, SAMHSA actually has a really great definition that I like to use because it's just a really good definition. So on the left side of your screen, you can see where it says prevention is a proactive process that empowers individuals and systems to meet the challenges of life events and transitions by creating and reinforcing conditions that promote healthy behaviors and lifestyles. And that very much is what we do in our prevention program. And when we're working with our youth and communities on prevention, we want to make sure that our youth have all the knowledge, skills, and abilities that they need so that they can make well-informed decisions for themselves. And obviously we want to make sure that that choice is the substance-free choice, but we know that doesn't always happen. But we really do want to promote those healthy behaviors and lifestyles. So when we're looking at prevention and also treatment for substance use, we often find ourselves really targeting 3 different areas. So on this screen, you can see there are genetic factors, individual factors, and environmental factors. Now, genetic factors, you probably think, well, what can you really do about that? It's in your genetics, it's in your genes, your DNA. However, this is a really important component because we know that youth who have family members who have experienced substance use disorders or substance use challenges, they are at a higher risk for developing those, potential disorders or challenges themselves. And so with that genetic component, we always encourage families who do have a history of addiction or who do have a history of substance use challenges to talk about that. That often is a hard conversation. We still know lots of stigma exists in our culture and communities surrounding substance use, but it is so important for youth to understand any sort of family history of substance use disorders or addictions that can help them make informed decisions on how they, proceed on this particular topic. So one of the other areas that we really focus on is those individual factors. So these are kind of what you think about with kind of your typical social emotional skill development, coping skills, problem solving skills, decision-making skills, emotional regulation, self-esteem, academic achievement, etc. As you can see on this list here. And these are factors that the individual, that particular youth, that particular teen, kind of has control over. It's kind of up to them to work on those skills, develop those skills, use those skills, practice those skills, etc. And all of those things can potentially then impact substance use. So, if a student, we see this so much over the last few years, students who might be experiencing mental health and are maybe struggling with coping or self-esteem or having, trauma in their life, they are at higher risk of engaging in substance use. And so when we think of those individual factors, that's where a lot of our work does lie, in a classroom, in a school, working with students directly so that they can really increase those individual knowledge, skills, and abilities. So the aspect that we're going to focus on next, and for the remainder of this webinar, are those environmental factors. So there are a lot of things in our environment, in our communities, in our homes, in our cultures, society, etc., that can impact and influence a youth choosing or not choosing to engage in substance use. So these are things like, what are the norms surrounding substance use? Is alcohol accepted, expected, is there that kind of mentality of, oh, I need to teach my kid how to drink alcohol before they go to college? Some of those types of norms can really influence and impact a teen choosing to use or not. Availability. So how accessible are these substances? Is there a vape shop across the street from the school? Is there alcohol in, all the stores, in downtown, wherever you are? How available are these substances? Are they in homes? Are they in the community? And then, kind of looking at laws and policy and enforcement. What are those rules? Are they enforced not only, in the home from a parental caregiver aspect, but also in the community? Are vape shops providing and selling to underage youth when they're not supposed to? All of those types of things are, can really impact youth use. And so I want to move into some data that really goes into some of these different environmental aspects of substance use prevention. So the data that I'm going to share with you today comes from the Illinois Youth Survey from 2022. The Illinois Youth Survey is a middle school and high school substance use behavior and attitude survey that is administered all over the state of Illinois. It was collected last spring, so we have really recent data, which is really exciting. And this particular data set I took from suburban Cook County, just to really try and hone in on what our youth and our communities in that suburban Cook County area are experiencing, sharing, etc. And so I have pretty much all 12th grade data to share with you. So I have 5 different areas that we have some data on as it relates to environment. And so the first one is that access piece. So thinking about how easy is it for youth to obtain these substances. So among the 12th grade students from the Illinois Youth Survey, about half of them say it is easy to obtain alcohol, marijuana, or e-cigarettes. And we know those are the most frequently used substances by teens. And about half those 12th graders are like, oh yeah, no problem, easily accessible. And so it's like, okay, well, why is that? And for us on that prevention side, we're always thinking, okay, where can we influence, where can we impact to make it harder for them to access? Then we look at some kind of those social norms, cultural norms, community norms. And so one of the ones that we look at is peer norms. And so really looking at, do students think, do they feel that pressure to fit in, to feel cool, popular, etc., if they engage in use? So about 2/3, about 67% of 12th grade students think that, they would be seen as cool if they used alcohol, marijuana, or e-cigarettes. And so, kind of that cultural norm, that those peer norms, even though it may or may not be true, but that perception, them thinking, oh, if I want to fit in, I need to engage in substance use. If I want to, feel normal, be in the in crowd, feel popular, feel cool, whatever, I need to use substances to make that happen. So about 2/3 of 12th graders feel that way. Then one of the other ones that we look at is perceived risk. And perceived risk, while independently, I would say is probably not an environmental factor, there's a lot of environmental factors that influence that perception of risk. So when we're talking about perceived risk, we are looking at how much risk or harm does that youth think will happen if they engage in regular alcohol use or, using marijuana, using e-cigarettes, etc. So we want to make sure that youth have that perceived high level of risk. We want them to know and understand the risk that they would experience if they engage in these different substances. And so there's a couple interesting things on this particular topic. We have seen the perception of risk for e-cigarettes greatly increase over the last few years, which is what we want to see. A couple years ago, that perception of risk was pretty low with e-cigarettes, but thinking about how e-cigarettes were marketed, the different messaging that was happening in the community surrounding e-cigarettes, when a lot of students just thought it was water and flavoring, what's the risk in that? So we saw fairly low perception of risk. Since then, luckily, through a lot of education, lots of, some policy change, lots of different factors, that perception of risk has increased a lot, which is also how we've seen a good significant decrease in e-cigarette use. So marijuana has been really interesting as well with that perception of risk. Marijuana across the board has consistently over the last number of years has had a pretty low perception of risk. So it's just slightly less than half of 12th grade students think there's some, moderate to great risk if they use marijuana, even just on a weekly basis. And so, where does that come from? And I think if we look at, the changes in legalization, not just, across a variety of states, but here in Illinois, we're coming up on 3 years of having cannabis be legal for recreational purposes in Illinois. Still, you have to be 21, so it is not legal for youth. But the changes in legalization, there's lots of different messaging surrounding cannabis use. If you drive down 294 by O'Hare, there's lots of billboards out there about all the great benefits of cannabis use. And so what are kind of those environmental factors? How is that playing into that perception of risk? So then the last two I have on this slide really look at the impact of parents or caregivers. So the first one is that perceived parental monitoring. And so one of the things that we know is that parents who do have higher levels of supervision or monitoring, that is seen as a protective factor. And however, with 12th grade students, about half of them report that their parents would never catch them if they were at a party where alcohol was served. And so, they're may not necessarily be getting the message from their parents that they don't want them to, put themselves in a position where there could be alcohol or other drugs. And so the last part is perceived parental approval. And so this is a question that asks students, how wrong do you think your parents feel it is for them to engage in use? And so on the next slide, I actually have a lot more specific data on that particular aspect. And I find it to be very impactful. I find it very convincing. I always share it with parents. So if we could see the next slide to get to that data. So the big message for this graph, it can be slightly confusing graph, so I do apologize, but this really shows the impact that parents or caregivers have on, them sending a message of approval or disapproval for substance use. So if we look at this graph, we're going to specifically look at alcohol. And so if we look at the middle color blue, the 9%, where it says there for alcohol. So that particular 9%, that shows, so of the students who responded to this survey, they said, yes, my parents strongly disapprove of alcohol use. Only 9% of those students engaged in alcohol use over the past 30 days, which is really good. It's a really low number. We like to see that. Whereas in contrast, that green on the right side is the strongly approve. So those are students who responded that they think their parents strongly approve of alcohol use. And of those students, 65% of them engaged in alcohol use over the past 30 days. So of the kids who know that their parents strongly disapprove, 9% of them used alcohol. Whereas kids who think their parents strongly approve will even throw an approve in there. They're at 44% or 65% have used alcohol in the past 30 days. So really showing, kids whose parents do not approve of use are significantly less likely to engage in use. And so much of that, where that perception comes, that perceived parental approval really comes from that home environment. And that's why we're here today having these conversations. So the last slide that I have that I'm going to share is really looking at a little more closely at that access piece. Just because a number of these access points are community-based, are, environmental. And so, there's a lot of numbers on this slide. I'll highlight a few of them. But when we're looking at that availability and access, where are these students getting it? Friends typically are, the most common place where students get them. Although then I always think, well, where did their friends get them from? But the survey doesn't go into that many details. But even if we're looking, at e-cigarettes, for example, the number 2 most popular place where students are getting e-cigarettes is a retail source, whether that's a vape shop or a grocery store or a gas station. You have to be 21 in order to purchase tobacco products. So how is it that, 39% of our high school students are getting things via a retail source? So that's really thinking at, okay, what in that environment, what is happening in these situations? Is it fake IDs? Who knows? The other point that really stands out to me is that alcohol access piece. So the first 2 rows there, parents with permission and parents without permission. So 25% of high school students are accessing alcohol from their parents without permission. So that could be, teens just going in the liquor cabinet or wherever alcohol is stored and accessing it that way, but without permission. And then there's the 45% of high school students who are getting alcohol from their parents with permission. And so I think, as we're thinking about the rest of our conversation today, what Eric is going to lead us in, just really thinking about, what that means, how that impacts things, et cetera. What messages are those sending? And I should point out, I did not say this at the beginning of the slide. I do apologize, even though it says on the title. So this information for access comes from students who have engaged in use. So we're not looking at students who are not using. This is very much just among those who have been using. But I will send it over to Eric, and he will give us lots more great information.
Thank you so much, Erin. Appreciate all the work that Peer Services, the Key Coalition are doing to not just collect data, but to arm families with information about teen substance use. And I think there is going to be a lot more information coming from us in the future about this issue. So I'm CEO of Front Door Health, and we provide addiction and mental health treatment services. We are different than 99% of the providers in this country in that we are delivering these services in the home. Right? So we're going into people's homes, we're treating teens, we're treating families, and we're bringing them a multidisciplinary physician-led care team, which can include a psychiatrist, a recovery coach, a nurse, and a therapist. There are many benefits to doing it this way. I'm going to give you 4. Number 1 is we're teaching teens to stay sober in the home environment where their sobriety is ultimately going to be tested. Right? So dealing with triggers at home, looking at risk factors in the home environment that could affect a teen's substance use. Number 2, the model is flexible. So we're able to treat people before school, after school, and on weekends. This allows teens to stay in school and possibly still participate in extracurricular activities, which may be positive forces in their life. Number 3, and this one's an important one, we're treating the entire family. We know that substance use, addiction, it's a family disease. It means that it affects more than the person more people than the person who's struggling with it. Right? So family members and the people around that person can also be impacted. And we want to make sure that everyone is taken care of. And number 4, which is the topic of this webinar, is that by going into people's homes, we're able to gain an in-depth understanding of environmental factors in the home that may be contributing to substance use or helping to prevent substance use, right? So I'll get more into that in the next few slides. All right, so Erin gave a great description of what we're seeing on the North Shore. And our experience as an organization in the field, treating teens, treating adults, is consistent with the data that Erin presented. The top 3 substances we're seeing among teens are alcohol, cannabis, and vaping, right? So of course, we're seeing opioids. Of course, we're seeing prescription drug abuse. Of course, we're seeing illegal drug abuse. But alcohol, cannabis, and vaping remain the top 3. Alcohol is very accessible. That is not earth-shattering information. Alcohol is often socially acceptable, right? Alcohol is not perceived as dangerous as some other chemicals because it's legal, right? Cannabis as well. With the legalization of cannabis, we've seen increased rates of cannabis use. As Erin pointed out, the perception of cannabis is that it's much less dangerous than some of the other substances that teenagers are using. And vaping. We've seen a huge increase in vaping among teens, high school students. And oftentimes vaping occurs along with cannabis use and alcohol use. So we see a lot of poly substance use. Now, this is especially important because we know that teens have a developing brain, and that substance use during the teenage years can actually cause more damage than it would after the brain has been fully developed, which doesn't happen until the age of 25. How do I know if my teen is struggling with substance use? I wish I could give you a formula that would allow you to definitively conclude whether or not your teen is struggling. I can't, but there are some signs that we're seeing out in the field that are correlated with teen substance use. Here are 4 of them, and there are many more. Number 1, a loss of interest in activities that were once valued. So it's not uncommon for us to see a teen start off freshman or sophomore year of high school, maybe playing a couple sports, maybe involved in some extracurricular activities that are healthy. And then by the junior or senior year of high school, they're not involved with anything outside of school, right? So the things that once brought them fulfillment are no longer in their life, right? This is something that we may look at as those activities have been replaced by unhealthy activities. More time is spent using substances than participating in those activities which were once fulfilling for the teen. Number 2, significant changes in behavior, mood, and attitude. And this is a tough one because we know the teenage years are very tumultuous for a lot of people. There's a lot going on hormonally, socially, changing environments, right? But here we're looking for extreme deviations in behavior. What does that mean? Could be physical aggression, could be verbal aggression, could be despondence, obstinance, defiance, unpredictable mood swings, isolation, right? So extreme deviations from baseline behavior. Number 3, associating with a new peer group. We see a teen who maybe starts off high school, freshman or sophomore year, with non-using friends, but by their junior or senior year of high school, they've acquired a completely new peer group. This doesn't happen overnight. I don't go from having all non-using friends to all using friends, but we see this slow acquisition, right? That over time, they're replacing their non-using friends with using friends. And of course, if I am engaging in drinking and drug use, I gravitate towards people who are also engaging in those activities, right? Number 4, this one's a tough one, an increase in lying and deception. Now, sometimes substance use and lying and dishonesty go hand in hand. People using substances may lie for many reasons. An obvious one could be to cover up the substance use, right? So if my parents confront me about using substances, I will just completely deny it, right? And it can be hard to get to the bottom of what's actually going on. Some people lie to minimize substance use. So that could look like my parents accused me of binge drinking every weekend, and I told them, no, I only drink in moderation. Right. My parents accused me of using substances, but I told them it's just cannabis and I don't believe it's dangerous. Right. And then most importantly, lying and deception can be used to enable substance use going forward. Right. So I will tell people whatever they want to hear in order to continue that pattern of behavior that I want to continue to engage in. So let's get to the environment. As I said, front door health, we're going into people's homes, we're providing these much needed services, and we're gaining an in-depth understanding of the home environment, the rooms in the home environment that could be triggering, the interactions with family members in the home environment that may be triggering, right? We know environment is huge, right? We know environment plays a significant role in the thoughts we have, the emotions we experience, and ultimately how we behave, right? And we see when we go into people's homes, there are triggers in the home environment that are strongly associated with teen substance use. And when a teen is constantly exposed to these stimuli, right, it can be very hard to think about anything else, right? It can be very hard to abstain from using substances. I've got a diagram here that just gives a basic understanding of the cycle from a trigger to a behavior, right? So a trigger could be sitting at dinner with my family while my parents have a glass or two of wine, right? I'm being exposed to the wine. I'm being exposed to the behavior of them drinking wine. That could lead to a variety of thoughts. One may be, I wish I was drinking wine, right? Or how come they get to drink wine and they're telling me I can't drink alcohol, right? Those thoughts can lead to various emotions. The first thought may lead to excitement, right? Wow, I'm watching other people drink and now I'm kind of feeling excited to also drink. The second thought, how come they're telling me not to drink and they're the ones drinking, could lead to resentment. Right? It could lead to feeling that my parents are being hypocritical, right? And that can lead to urges and cravings, which eventually elicit a behavior. And in this case, we're talking about the using behavior. After the teen uses a substance, they get this reward, which could be an enhancement of positive emotions or an alleviation of negative emotions, right? And this whole cycle gets reinforced over time, the more that it happens, right? It becomes more and more solidified in the memory of the teen, and those triggers can get even stronger, right? The more that this cycle happens, right? So we want to address triggers in the home environment. We can remove triggers. We can teach the teen to deal with those triggers in real time. There are a lot of things we want to address. Next slide. So what are we seeing in people's homes? What are some risks that we see in the home that contribute to teen substance use? Number one, parents drinking regularly in the home. Now, this doesn't have to be binge drinking. This doesn't have to be the excessive consumption of alcohol, right? Regular drinking 4, 5, 6 times a week, even if it's in moderation, is still a risk factor. Right. So consistent, frequent drinking in the home, even if it's not binge drinking, can still send the message that drinking is an acceptable activity that can be engaged in on an almost daily basis, even if it's not 5 drinks or more within a certain sitting. Enabling teen alcohol consumption, this can look a few different ways. We've seen it where parents are buying liquor or buying cannabis for their teenager. We've also seen it where parents are not buying the alcohol, but providing a location in their basement for teens to consume alcohol, right? There are also situations in which Parents may help their teen avoid negative consequences from the drinking or from the substance use. So in these situations, it can send a message to the teen that there are very few risks from drinking and that the parents are willing to take a risk by providing a location where teens can drink. Number 3 is a lack of healthy boundaries in the household. This can look many ways. Number 1, we see a permissive environment where everything is going on unchecked. The teen is engaging in all sorts of behaviors, and there's really not much accountability. Guidelines or expectations from the parents may not be clearly expressed. Consequences may be almost non-existent. At the other end of the spectrum, we're seeing a more authoritarian environment, right? And this is an environment in which there are high demands placed on the teen, and everything is super structured and super rigid, where the teen may not have much idle time, there may not be much nurturing, high expectations that cause the teen to experience a lot of pressure on a daily basis. And then the 4th risk factor is the visibility and accessibility of alcohol, drugs, and drug paraphernalia in the home. So what does this mean? Alcohol, it could be a bar, it could be a wet bar, it could be beer in the fridge, it could be a wine cellar. Alcohol around the home obviously is a stimulus that teens can feel pressured by. There's also alcohol paraphernalia. Could be a wine glass, could be a margarita glass, it could be a shot glass, it could be a beer mug. Drugs, could be cannabis, could be pipes, could be edibles, right? And prescription drugs. So sometimes parents will be prescribed a drug, and we would want to make sure that those drugs are secured and hidden away from teens, especially the ones that are more habit forming. Right. So creating an environment that is free of drugs and alcohol can go a very long way. Now, what are some protective factors that we're seeing in the home environment? Well, rituals and routines go a long way. Right. So when there's some structure in the family system, it could be having dinner as a family 3 or 4 nights a week. It could be having a movie day on Sunday. It could be where the teen picks an activity to engage in with the family, a healthy activity, and the family switches off, choosing which activity they're going to do on a particular day or week, right? But consistency and rituals provide a sense of identity and belonging. And we've seen in households where there are these things, lower rates of teen substance use. Number 2 is cohesion. So what we're seeing is that families who take a team approach to solving problems, to identifying and solving problems, tend to see much lower rates of teen substance use. So it's not everyone for themselves. It's not adversarial, right? It's we are working as a unit. We are one, right? And this is something that can be taught. This is something that can be learned. The third one is, in my opinion, the most interesting. Psychological safety. And this is a concept that has been used in the past to describe an ingredient, if you will, of successful teams. Right? So they've done research on what makes a team successful, right, versus unsuccessful. And they've found that teams with psychological safety tend to outperform teams without psychological safety. Psychological safety can be applied to the family system as well, right? And this is an environment in which people can share openly and honestly without the fear of shame or judgment, right? And this can really open up the lines of communication among family members. If I know that I can share my mistakes, my problems, my successes with family members without the fear of shame or judgment, I'm probably going to be a lot more open with my family members, and that is a really good thing, right? So open and honest communication. All right, with all this said, and I covered a very small fraction of some of the protective and risk factors that we're seeing in the environment, right? But wanting to get to what parents can do, right? What actions can you take to prevent teen substance use? Number 1, again, this is not earth-shattering information, but make it a drug and alcohol-free home, or store drugs and alcohol in a secure place that's hidden away from your teen. Right. Number two, foster open communication, build rapport with your teen very early on and often. Right. Having healthy conversations with them, even if they're only 5 minutes, right, can certainly add up. Right. When people are not communicating in an open way, oftentimes feelings are getting internalized and not dealt with. Right. So we want everything out in the open so that if there is a problem, we can handle it in an appropriate way. 3, along with the protective factor of structure, looking at family rituals and routines. Again, these can create a sense of belonging, a sense of identity for the teen, right, and the family, right, and can really build trust as well. Setting and enforcing clear boundaries. An example could be if curfew is at 11 p.m. on weekends, I would want to make that clear to my teen. I would also want to provide a specific reason for the boundary. I'd want to lay out the consequences for if that boundary is breached. And then if the boundary is not adhered to, I'd want to actually give those consequences. Right? If we're setting boundaries but not enforcing them, it can lower the parent's credibility with the teen. Lectures and threats. We've seen lectures and threats backfire. When parents are lecturing their teen on a particular topic, teens tend to feel talked down to and infantilized. Right. We've seen, parents make threats to teens. And again, it can be a very stressful situation. You can feel that this is the only way, right, I can get through to my teen. Right. But we have seen more often than not threats backfire. People tend to get defensive, and then that defensiveness leads into an unhealthy interaction. And then absolute language, all drugs are bad. I've heard parents say this, and then the teen may experiment with drugs and not experience any negative consequences. And then they'll kind of be questioning the parent as to why they would say all drugs are bad when it just seems like this has positive consequences for me, and that can lower credibility. Brief non-scheduled check-ins. If a teen is watching TV on the couch, a simple 2-minute interaction asking, how they're doing, what's going on in their life, just getting a pulse on where they're at emotionally and mentally. It doesn't have to be more than 2 minutes. It doesn't have to be a fancy, 2-hour check-in with the family, right? Just these brief interactions can really add up. Being mindful of the parent's substance use and other possible unhealthy behaviors that may be being modeled to the teen, right? So the drinking, the frequency, the amount, the effects, doesn't matter if it's over dinner or we're having a social gathering at the house on the weekend. Just being mindful of that and how it could impact the teen. This is a big one. This will likely require uncomfortable and difficult conversations. Substance use is not easy to talk about, right? Many things are not easy to talk about with your teen, right? But it's important that they are talked about, right? So this will require uncomfortable, awkward, difficult conversations, but it can really be worth it. And then a strengths-based approach. Sometimes we see, a rattling off of all the things the teen did wrong and all these issues, and that's part of their identity. We also want to consider that they have strengths, right? And maybe those strengths are being overshadowed by some of these unhealthy behaviors. But in everyone I've worked with, there's at least one strength, right? One positive quality, and most of the time even more, right? We don't want to let those go by the wayside. So where can you get help, right? You may be struggling with a teen client who has substance use. You may have a teen yourself who has substance use, and I can only imagine what you're going through. Every situation is different, and I'm really sorry. The good news is that there are treatment options available. Right? There are many different treatment modalities out there that can help your teen and the family. I'll go over a few. Interventionists. This is not like the A&E show, intervention. An interventionist, what I mean here, is someone who can come over to the house, assess the situation, talk with the teen, talk with the family, and then make a treatment recommendation from there. Right? So they do an assessment and they kind of give you an idea of what would be the most appropriate path given, what you've reported to them. There are residential treatment centers. This is where a teen would go away for 30, 60, or 90 days. They'd be in a structured environment with other people who are struggling with substance use. And there would be group therapy, individual therapy, activities, right, that would help the teen reframe thoughts or teach them coping skills. There's outpatient treatment. Outpatient is where people may attend group therapy 4 nights a week, 3 hours per night, right? And then come home afterward. They would be in a group with people who are struggling with substance use. There would be activities, psychoeducation, processing of emotions and how people handle difficult emotions and healthy behaviors. There are various support groups, many in Chicago, Alcoholics Anonymous, Smart Recovery, which is more about considering thoughts, feelings, and reframing those thoughts. There is Families Anonymous. This is for families in Al-Anon, for families of someone who is struggling with substance use. And then finally, there is Sober Living. This is a structured environment where there's accountability. They would be living with other people who are struggling with substance use. This wouldn't really include programming, but it can be a good structured environment in the short term. If anyone has any further questions, my information is at the end of this webinar to be happy to expand on anything that you're wondering about.
Great. Thank you so much, Erin and Eric. That was really insightful. Additionally, I wanted to share some local resources that are located around New Trier Township. There are many options out there, but we just wanted to highlight a couple that are local to us, to the community we serve. Additionally, there is the Illinois helpline, where you can actually search resources available with different filters, such as distance or substance, depending on what you're looking for. You can revisit this information on our website in a few days after the presentation has concluded, or if you'd like access to anything, you can snap a picture with your phone. But as I said, it will be posted on our website in a couple days. Additionally, we have more curated resources for parents and providers on our Linktree account that can help you talk to your teen when they recognize there's a problem, current trends, things to look out for, drug fact sheets, a whole bunch of things. So I invite you to take a look at that. And now we'll be opening up the Q&A for questions. If you want to type them in the Q&A box, and we'll address them one by one. So let's see, we got a couple in here. So the first one, can you explain more about what you mean by parents strongly approve/disapprove? Do you mean disapproval of alcohol use in general, or disapproval of their child's alcohol use?
All right, so I think that one is for me on the particular graph that I shared, and that is specifically looking at the parents' disapproval of their child's use. It's a little confusing. There's lots of factors, but for that particular one, it is the parent disapproving of teen youth, their child's use. And so it's obviously, as the students are completing this survey and the information that we're getting, it is their perception. And so they're interpreting that as it is. But, I think when we're thinking about, how is it that parents are conveying that approval or disapproval, Eric gave some great examples of what that could look like. And I mean, I've done entire presentations just on this topic. But, really thinking about how are we sending as a parent, how are we sending a no use message? How are we making sure our kids understand what it is that we're saying? And one of the things that when Eric was talking about the kind of setting those rules and expectations, just in general, it's so important to include that why. You know, you can say, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, but without really getting at the why component, it's not nearly as effective. And so I just wanted to highlight that aspect because that why is so important. So if your teen maybe is on a sport or plays a musical instrument that requires their lungs and they're struggling with vaping, it's like, well, you know, let's think about your lung health, and I want you to be able to succeed in playing the trumpet or running across the soccer field, and therefore I don't want you to use, you know, so really thinking about your child really specifically in those regards.
Great, thank you. Next question for Eric. Does Front Door Health offer services to or have translation capacities for non-English speaking families?
Yes, and if we don't have someone in-house to help families, non-English speaking families, we in the past have brought in providers and professionals from the outside to make sure that we're delivering the best treatment possible for our clients. And that's another advantage of the model, is it's very flexible, and we can get you set up with a team that's going to meet your specific needs, your teen's needs and the family's needs. But it's a great question.
Great, thank you. All right. We often hear that youth are intimidated when they attend NA or AA meetings that are designed for adults. Are there specific groups similar to NA or AA that specifically work with only youth?
Yes. And Erin, you may have some insight on this. There are many support groups, not just geared toward different substances like cocaine, cannabis, alcohol, methamphetamine, but also geared toward certain age demographics. Right. And yeah, 12-step, these support groups can be very intimidating. Right. And they're not for everyone. But yeah, there are groups geared toward the teenage demographic.
Yeah, and I will add to that, there has been an increasing amount of virtual support groups. I know there's one for vaping that is called Quit the Hit, which is actually an Instagram-based support group. So they are virtually put into a peer group that, you know, they identify with, and they can, you know, get reminders and things like that. So it's on a platform that they are comfortable with, and it doesn't necessarily require them to physically be somewhere face to face. But I guess the report is that that's been really successful as well. All right, next question. Good presentation, thank you. In Utah, they have a Parents Empowered campaign that is very beneficial to parents there. You can look at it at parentsempowered.org. Thank you so much. Yeah, definitely, I can put that in the chat if anyone was interested in that. So thank you. Next question. What's a good way to approach the topic of substance use with a teen? Sometimes when asking that teen directly, it can make my teen immediately put up walls and not want to talk.
Yes, great question. And I'm sure Eric, you can add a lot to this as well. Use this webinar as a way to, you know, bring up the conversation. There are so many natural opportunities to bring this topic up, whether you have the news on or you see a commercial. I know a lot of teens don't actually see commercials anymore, or maybe you see an ad, or you're in the car and you see a billboard, you know, you're listening to music and there's a specific lyric that references substance use, which, you know, so using kind of some of those naturally occurring things is a great way. Or just ask a question. Hey, what are you learning about this in school? What do you hear other students talk about? What are your thoughts? You know, just open-ended questions to start that conversation. And they don't have to be long. They can be a minute long, 2 minutes long, nothing crazy. But just look for little opportunities to get that conversation started.
Great, thank you. And next question for Front Door Health. Is there a wait list for teens to join the program?
Currently, there is no wait list, and another thing we feel strongly about is getting people admitted, assuming they're appropriate for the program, as soon as possible. So we've seen wait times of up to 3 months or 6 months for a psychiatrist or a therapist appointment. A lot of demand for mental health right now, so no wait list, and we can usually get people going within 24 to 48 hours. It's important to get that care immediately and not have to wait for it. It's a good question.
Thank you. And then our last one is a comment. Alcohol can be one of the primary factors to create wrong thoughts within youth. Believe that the use of alcohol can give you more happiness or give you power. Definitely. I think, there's this perception of what it's going to give you. And so I think that's where this webinar and parents talking to their youth is so important in order to tell them the facts, tell them the truth, tell them the real things that are out there. Eric and Erin, I don't know if you had any more to comment on that, but I definitely think that's an important statement.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And, one of the things we've seen, I think it is true for alcohol and even the tobacco industry is, use that as an opportunity to talk to your youth about it. It's like, yeah, why is it that they're glamorizing this behavior or making it seem like it's gonna, yes, give you happiness or solve your problems, use that as that conversation starter and very specifically address that. Because one of the things that we talk about in prevention is helping teens really filter all of the messages that they're getting about substance use or really any topic. They're getting information from so many different places. It can be so confusing. It can, yes, be this particular message stated here. And how do they filter those? How do they figure out where those messages are coming from, the motivators, all of that stuff, so that they can really help, make informed decisions. It's a great statement.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. So that looks like that's all the questions. I want to thank you all for your attendance today and your commitment to prevention. If you have any questions after the fact, feel free to send any of us an email at the emails that are listed on the page here. If you have specific questions for myself or Key Coalition, feel free to reach out to the email at the bottom. Additionally, if you're looking for resources now or fact sheets, feel free to use your phone camera to scan our QR code to be taken to our Linktree account where you can have access to all of those good resources, sign up for our newsletter, and learn about future events. So thank you so much for your attendance, and we hope to see you at our next webinar.
Thank you.